Sonny Dykes' TCU program has been the big surprise of the 2022 season. 1 year ago today, TCU's season was over. They had a 5-7 record, a losing conference record, and they'd made the move to fire longtime head coach Gary Patterson in the middle of the season. As they say though, what a difference a year makes. Now, at the end of the 2022 season, the Horned Frogs are playoff bound with an 11-1 record, an appearance in the Big 12 championship game, and a date with the number 2 Michigan Wolverines in the college football playoff. The driving force behind this re-energized program is an offense led by coordinator Garrett Riley. It's not that the Frog offense was terrible in 2021. They did finish 36th in total offense, so they didn't move the ball, but in spite of all the yards that they gained, they weren't very dangerous and finished significantly lower in scoring offense. What Riley's really done then is to improve their red zone touchdown percentage and to make the offense much more explosive, with the Horned Frogs finishing the regular season ranked 4th in the country in plays at 20 yards or more. In this video, we'll focus on that second improvement by looking at how Riley generated some of those big plays against a team that doesn't give up a lot of them, at least by Big 12 standards, and that's the Baylor defense that was led by Dave Aranda and Ron Roberts. We're starting here because in this game, TCU was very big play dependent. If they got a gain of at least 20 yards in a drive, then they scored a touchdown. If they didn't, they punted, and that was true up until their final drive of the game. Garrett Riley is part of a long list of young coaches who are coming out of the Mike Leach air raid coaching tree, but who are also looking to add more diversity into their personnel usage and formations, and to develop the run game as more of a viable weapon. And they're often doing this by bringing in ideas from other parts of the spread world and beyond. For his part, Riley's done a nice job of achieving this balance, running the ball 56% of the time in 2022, and being almost exactly as effective on the ground as he was through the air, with top 30 rankings in both of those areas. When Baylor's Dave Aranda and Ron Roberts came into this game then, they weren't preparing for what many people think of when they hear air raid. They had to be balanced on defense, meaning that they had to find ways to get numbers against the run while also defending TCU's very effective air attack. One structure that they used to do this was really their base look, which is a cover 4 shell with their cornerbacks and safeties dividing the deep field into quarters. When we talk about cover 4 and how Baylor uses it, it's important to know that it's really more of a family of coverages, with different teams playing it in different ways, or even with the same team playing it in different ways in different situations. And this latter case is definitely true with Baylor. To understand how TCU attacked Baylor's defense, we need to focus not just on that 4-deep shell, but on exactly how Baylor was running it and on what choices they made within it. To see how this works, let's focus on the bottom of the screen, where the Bears have a cornerback and a safety playing over the top of 2 detached receivers. Many people look at the depth of those defenders and worry about all of the space that's being created underneath of them. Doesn't it look like this risk giving up a lot of short throws underneath? Because of this concern, many teams would take this nickelback, who's lined up to the inside of those guys, and walk him out over the slot. In this way, they're able to play 3-on-2, with the cornerback and safety playing anything vertical, and the nickelback giving them support underneath. The first choice that we want to talk about in Baylor's cover 4 then is the decision not to do this. In this shot, we see that they're playing their nickelback in what's called an apex position, where he lines up halfway between TCU's slot receiver and their left tackle. And if we draw a line just outside of that guy, we can see the basic structure of their coverage. They're basically saying that in this look, anything that happens outside of that line will just be given to the cornerback and safety, with those guys handling TCU's 2 receivers in some kind of 2-on-2 combination. While those guys don't get any help on the outside, they do get help to the inside, and this will be important for understanding some of TCU's attack strategy. In underneath coverage, they have their nickelback and 2 linebackers playing in the middle of the field. On top of that, they're also going to get inside help from the opposite side of the formation, where they've got that other cover 4 safety and cornerback. In the formation that TCU's running, there's only 1 wide receiver lined up underneath those guys, and so in this case, they're going to give any vertical route by that guy to the cornerback that's lined up over him, and that's going to free up the safety, who then doesn't have a threat of his own, to look back across the formation to the opposite side. After the snap, we see him tilted inside toward the middle of the field, and from this position, he's looking to cut off any crossing routes or posts that might be working back in his direction. That all deals with the key details of the coverage, but what about the run defense? Looking back at the defenders at the bottom of the screen, the real power of leaving them alone on the perimeter like this is that it allows Baylor's nickelback to stay relatively tight to the box. And we'll see how that works on this play, where TCU's running a same-side zone play toward that guy. In this play, the center, left guard, and left tackle are all working to the left toward the same side as the running back's alignment, and they're going to look to block Baylor's nose tackle, defensive end, and inside linebacker. After the snap, the running back's going to start out working away from those guys to the right to get the ball from the quarterback, and then he's going to work back toward them where he's got those 3 guys blocking for him. With the 3 play side blockers all occupied by guys in the box, though, TCU doesn't have anybody left to block the nickelback, and from his tight alignment with the run working toward him, he's able to fold into the box unblocked to make the tackle. When the defense is able to use their nickelback as an extra run defender like this, one offensive response will be to run away from him, and that's what we're going to see TCU do on this play. Again, though, Baylor's cover 4 structure is going to give him an answer. The key is going to come from the cover 4 safety up at the top of the screen. Before the snap, we see that, unlike on the last play, he does have a vertical threat here, with TCU lining up a tight end to this side of the field. That tight end could obviously attack the safety in the passing game, and so if he goes vertical, then that safety is going to have to cover him. On this play, though, that tight end stays in to block, giving TCU an extra run blocker to this side of the formation. When he does this, though, the safety no longer has a vertical threat, and much like we saw in the last play, this frees him up to fit in elsewhere. When he reads run and sees that the tight end staying in to block, he's going to fly down in run support, giving the defense an extra defender to match that tight end as an extra blocker. Here he lets the running back run over him a little bit, but with better tackling, he would have been able to hold this to just a short gain. So again, to recap all of that before looking at how TCU attacked it, we've seen that they're playing a cover 4 look with the cornerback and safety at the bottom of the screen, playing 2-on-2 against anything outside or vertical. Those guys then have help to the inside with a nickelback and 2 linebackers in underneath coverage, and the opposite safety offering inside help deep as long as he's not threatened by a receiver of his own. Against the run, this look gets the nickelback into the run fit on anything that comes toward him, while the opposite safety can come down on runs in the opposite direction, again, as long as he's not threatened by a receiver. In this way, they're able to get as many as 8 defenders into the run fit, even though they're facing a spread formation that puts just 6 blockers in the box. With those basics out of the way, we're ready to get into the chess match that went on between this defense and Riley's offense. Let's start here on TCU's second drive of the game after going 3 and out on their first. This is a 2nd and 10, and this play is effectively a warning shot to Baylor just in case they're thinking about playing a lot of cover 4 in this game. The result's going to be a 39-yard post route to Quentin Johnston up at the top of the screen, and so the question is, how does TCU get him open deep against a coverage that puts 2 defensive backs over the top of him? The answer comes back to what we've just learned about Baylor's coverage. TCU's lined up with split backs in the backfield, a tight end and a wide receiver to the right side of the formation, and Johnston all alone is the single receiver to the left. With just one receiver lined up to the left side like this, the safety that's lined up over him doesn't have a vertical threat of his own, and so what does he do? Well, against the pass, he's looking to be that inside help player against any crossing routes coming from the other side of the field. On this play, he's getting one of those routes as TCU brings their tight end across the formation at intermediate depth, and when that safety sees this, he's looking to sit and cut that route. Okay, so far so good, but if we run this back just a little bit, we see the effect of it. Remember that in order to free up that safety to cover crossing routes like this, Baylor's asking their cornerback to play loose man over the single receiver. When the safety to this side comes up to jump the crosser, it isolates that cornerback on his man, who also happens to be TCU's leading receiver. Johnston wins on his post route downfield, TCU picks up the long first down to keep the drive alive, and 5 plays later, they score their first touchdown of the game. Given that outcome, it's not surprising that on the first play of the next drive, Baylor comes out in something different. On this play, TCU's in a 3-by-1 set with 2 receivers and a tight end to the left side of the formation, and again, a single receiver to the right. The interesting thing here is in how Baylor's handling the 2 detached players to the 3 receiver side. On the first play that we studied, we saw that the nickelback was lined up in tight to the box as an extra run defender, while the safety played over his slot receiver in cover 4. On this play, the nickelback has instead walked out over the slot receiver, and the safety is playing in tight to the box as that extra run defender. The benefit of making this switch is that when you pull that safety inside, you also give him the ability to play as the inside help player against the pass. So if the wing tight end were to run a crossing route like he did on the last play, then that safety would be able to pick him up without relying on any help from the other side of the formation. In this way, Baylor frees up that opposite safety to play as a deep half defender. This puts him inside and over the top of the single receiver to this side, so if that receiver runs a post like we saw in the last play, then he'll be in perfect position to take it away. So, by making this adjustment, Baylor's taken away the deep passing game to the single receiver side. They've kept their strength on the inside by using the strong safety to cut off crossing routes, and they have a defensive back to each side of the formation ready to fill in as those 2 extra defenders against the run. With all of those areas well defended, the Bears are basically daring TCU to attack that 2-on-2 matchup at the bottom of the screen, and on this play, Garrett Riley's dialed up a perfect play to do this. To understand why this play is so effective, we need to say a little bit more about how the nickelback and cornerback are defending those two receivers in this coverage. If we switch back and look at Baylor's base cover 4, we can remember that the defense was defending the slot receiver with a safety over the top, playing with a lot of cushion, and a nickelback inside and underneath. From that position, the nickelback was able to play as an inside help player, ready to cut the slot receiver if he runs something like a slant or an in route. When Baylor makes that adjustment and gets rid of the safety over the top, they have to make a decision about the nickelback. They can play him deep to take away the vertical route, in which case they lose him as an inside help player. Or they can keep him as an inside help player and find some other way to cover his receiver downfield. And in this coverage, they're going with the second option. The idea here is that they're basically playing an inverted cover 2. So the cornerback is going to drop back to play a deep half, where he's working to a spot in between those two receivers so that he can get over the top of a vertical route by either of them. With that cornerback playing as the sole deep defender, though, that potentially creates a lot of ground for him to cover. For example, what if the outside receiver goes wide down the sidelines while the slot receiver goes straight down the hash? This would create a lot of space for that guy to cover. The nickelback's job then is to shrink that space, and we can get a good look at his technique if we switch over to this play. Before the snap, we see that his slot receiver's lined up just outside the hash, and the nickelback's lined up inside of him to play his inside helping role underneath. After the snap, when he feels that receiver pushing vertical, he's going to work out and collision him, and the goal here is to force him to come as far off of the hash as possible. In fact, after that collision, we see that the slot receiver ends up at a spot roughly halfway between the hash and the numbers. This puts him very close to the outside receiver and shrinks the space that anyone playing over those guys would have to cover. After making this collision, the nickelback then sits in underneath coverage, giving support to the cornerback who's dropping to play his deep half over the top. So that's how Baylor's going to defend anything outside the hash in this coverage. Of course, we know that inside the hash they have all sorts of help, and so if that slot receiver wants to take an immediate inside release on a crossing route or something, then the nickelback will just pass him off and let him run himself right into that safety and all of those linebackers in the middle of the field. Unfortunately for him, on this play, that is exactly the detail that Garrett Riley's taking advantage of. To do that, he's having his outside receiver run a post, and this route's purely designed to run off the cornerback playing that deep half over the top. When that guy runs a post, it's going to pull that cornerback deep and inside, opening up a lot of space down the sideline. Riley's then running his slot receiver on a route that's been really trendy lately, and we can think of this as kind of a cross return, where the receiver releases inside as if he's running a crossing route, but then bangs it back outside toward the sidelines, ending up more like a delayed corner route. We can see how all this ends up if we switch over to the end zone angle. Here, we see the nickelback dropping just inside the hash, and we see the slot receiver taking a hard release inside and underneath of him, telling the nickelback to pass that guy off to the linebackers and the safety that Baylor's got playing in tight to the box. If we pause the shot right here, we see the outside wide receiver stemming vertical to run his post, with the cornerback playing over the top, and we see the nickelback dropping underneath to take away anything that might stop short from that guy. Now the receivers are going to make their breaks. If we keep an eye on the cornerback, we see that as his receiver stems inside on the post, he runs with him, clearing out space down the deep sideline. At the same time, we know that this safety is sitting inside, ready to defend a potential crossing route. When his slot receiver breaks back outside, however, he's going to be in no position to defend it. The slot receiver runs deep and outside, taking him behind the nickelback that's dropping in underneath coverage, and he's going to catch the ball in a ton of space, ending up with a 77-yard gain. Now that we understand Baylor's two major coverage structures and some of the ways that TCU was attacking them, we're ready to look at a two-play sequence that led to the Horned Frogs' third touchdown. When we look at the two coverage structures that we've been studying here, something that we notice is that it's tough to disguise which one's being played. If we think about the wide side safety in particular, we know that he'll either be playing over the slot receiver on the outside or in the box to cut crossing routes. Jumping from one of these alignments to the other would require a lot of movement from that guy, and that makes it easier for the quarterback to see any potential disguise. We can see how TCU used this information on this play, a 2nd and 5 from Baylor's 46. If we keep an eye on that wide side safety, we see that before the snap, he starts to cheat inside to play as that inside defender in the middle of the field. When quarterback Max Duggan sees this, he pulls up and runs a check with me to the sideline, giving the coaches the chance to change the play. What do they change it to? Well, if we look at the two receivers at the bottom of the screen, in that space that the safety's leaving, we see them just running two verticals. After the snap, we'll see the cornerback bailing out to play his deep half, and we'll see the nickelback push wide past the slot to give that cornerback help underneath. On this play, he's not going to collision the slot receiver, and that seems to be by design because the Bears are actually dropping this edge player out to play as an extra inside help player underneath. This creates a problem against two vertical routes, though, because that edge player is never going to be able to get to the slot receiver as he runs down the hash. This creates space in that seam, and so the quarterback hits the slot receiver in that space underneath of the cornerback who's dropped out to play a deep half, and outside of the safety and edge player who are dropping as inside help players in the middle of the field. After that completion, TCU puts their foot on the gas and goes with tempo, snapping the ball just 14 seconds after the end of the previous play. If we look at the wide side safety up here at the top of the screen, we see that unlike on the last play, he's walking out to play over the slot receiver, putting him in that more typical cover 4 alignment. So who does TCU attack when that guy adds in on the outside like this? They go back across the formation to attack that opposite safety. This time, they've got two wide receivers lined up to that side, and so the safety and cornerback are playing 2-on-2 over the top of them. On this play, TCU is going to show screen action with the outside receiver running a little quick screen, while the slot receiver fires out to block the cornerback. With the cornerback getting blocked like this, they're then asking the safety to replace him, flying downhill in order to make the tackle. Problem is that TCU's not actually running a screen here. Instead, as that safety flies down to replace the cornerback in screen defense, the slot receiver who had been showing block just releases straight down the field. The Bear defenders don't see it in time, and he's got a clear path to the end zone. For the most part, TCU's big plays in this game came through the air, with Baylor's coverage structures doing a nice job of taking away the run game. That run game was always a threat, though, and on this long gain, we'll see how the threat of it forced Baylor into a mistake that allowed quarterback Max Duggan to pick up a nice gain on the ground. This is a 2nd and 1, and TCU's running a 2-by-2 set here with two wide receivers split out to each side of the formation. If we look at Baylor's safeties, they're trying to disguise their look a little bit with the wide side safety walked out toward the hash. Just before the snap, though, we're going to see him jump in toward the box, showing us that they're playing that inverted coverage on the outside with the cornerback bailing out to midpoint the two receivers in a deep half, and the nickelback playing as the inside help player underneath, looking to collision the slot and shrink the space that the cornerback has to cover. At the top of the screen, we know that TCU has two wide receivers, and so the cornerback and safety are both going to have vertical threats in the passing game, preventing either of them from adding in as extra defenders against the run. To attack this structure on the ground, the Frogs are going to run a counter read play to the left. That means that to the play side, the left tackle, left guard, and center are all going to block back on Baylor's nose tackle and defensive ends, sealing them off to the inside away from the play. They're then pulling their right guard and right tackle, with the guard working to kick out Baylor's linebacker on the edge, while the right tackle wraps up to the middle linebacker. This scheme, with the play side blockers working back and with two pullers coming around from the opposite side of the field, is the key feature of the counter blocking scheme. But what about this outside linebacker on the backside edge of the play? Nobody's left to block him, and so TCU is going to make him the responsibility of the quarterback, who's going to control him with a read, keeping the ball around the edge if he crashes down to chase the run. In this way, they've got a plan to take out all 6 defenders in the box. We can remember, though, that one of the points of bringing a safety down into the box is to give the Bears an extra unblocked defender in the run game, and that should give them everything that they need to take this play away. Based on some other plays from this game, it looks like Baylor's handling this read by having the outside linebacker just ignore it and crash down the line to chase the running back in pursuit, taking away any cutback and hopefully tackling him from behind. It's then the job of that safety in the box to slow play the run and sit on the backside for the quarterback. In fact, we can see him doing just this if we switch over to another play. Here, after the snap, we're going to see this outside linebacker at the bottom of the screen being left unblocked as the read defender, and when the run works away from him and the quarterback reads him, he's going to crash down to chase the run. We're then going to see the safety that's rolling down into the box playing as that quarterback defender sitting on the backside ready to explode when the quarterback keeps it. On TCU's last touchdown drive, though, we're going to see that safety get a little greedy. As he reads this counteraction away from him, he's not going to see the quarterback pull the ball and keep it, not realizing his mistake until the quarterback's already headed downhill with a full head of steam. When that safety fails to take the quarterback, Baylor's left with just that nickelback on the edge, and this is going to put him in a nearly impossible situation. Remember that against the pass, he has to work out to the slot receiver, collisioning him and shrinking the space that the cornerback has to defend over the top. In fact, immediately after the snap, we see him shuffling in that direction, even as he peers back inside to make his run pass read. What this does, though, is it creates a huge lane between that player and the offensive line, making it very difficult for the nickelback to fall back inside for the tackle. The end result is a 22-yard gain, which gets the Horned Frogs into Baylor territory and sets them up for their fourth and final touchdown. This lets them pull within 2 points of the Bears, setting them up to kick the game-winning field goal on their final drive.